I don't think the Rwanda migrants policy is very pretty. But I think it's a very sensible proposal that it will attempt to get to grips with what is a lethal situation. These migrants coming across the channel, as we found out last November when nearly 30 of them drowned, are putting their lives at risk. And it is, I think it's this nation's moral duty to try and stop them doing this, to try and stop them getting into these dinghies. And if they get the message that when you arrive on Folkestone Beach, it'll be next stop Rwanda, then they'll stop coming across the channel and we'll literally be saving lives. That's why I think Priti Patel's policy is to be supported, and that's why I think millions and millions, the vast majority of people in this country, want something to be done about what is happening in the English Channel. And so I hereby declare my full support for this policy. What about you, Henry?
Well said, Kevin. I think you've put it very well indeed, and I certainly do support this policy. It cannot be right for a sovereign nation to have its borders literally overrun day after day by illegal migrants coming to this country, and worse than that, actually being facilitated by evil people smugglers to whom thousands are paid per individual who gets into a rubber dinghy and attempts that crossing, sometimes not successfully attempting that crossing, as we saw last year with the awful drownings in the channel. So there's nothing compassionate about allowing this illegal migration to continue. It's extremely dangerous. It's a security risk for this country. And if those attempting those crossings know that they have a strong chance of being relocated to Rwanda, which is a perfectly safe country, an agreement that we have reached with that African nation, then I think it will break that business model of the people smugglers. And about time too. This really needs to happen as soon as possible, and I sincerely hope that we won't see the courts and the establishment blocking that first flight that is due to go out tomorrow.
One of the ironies of the current campaign is that it makes Rwanda look like some kind of backward heart of darkness.
Yeah.
How dare you send
How
people...
racist.
Yeah, how dare you send people to Rwanda? What a terrible, terrible place to live. So they end up depicting an African country which has made huge leaps and bounds forward over the past few years. They end up depicting it as a hellhole, which is really ironic. But also, I think this point about knowing who's coming to the country, I think the key point to make about this is it is not racist to be concerned about who comes to a country, to want to know who's coming, to be able to measure in some way that this number of people have come and they've been allowed in for these purposes and they're given these rights. All of that, controlling your borders and knowing who's coming in and who's going out, is the right of every sovereign nation. And the way in which that's being depicted as a form of racism, I think has such a detrimental impact on public discussion, because instead of having an honest, practical discussion about what kind of immigration we might need in the future, instead it becomes a shouting match between these virtuous middle classes who think the rest of us are just a bunch of racist gammon. So they've really destroyed our capacity to have the kind of discussion about immigration that we need to have.
Yeah. This policy is incredibly popular. Yeah. People want this issue dealt with. The idea of tens of thousands, not even thousands, over the year, tens of thousands of young, healthy men from we know not where. They often don't even have passports and ID on them. But from, yes, some of these are war-torn countries. Some of these people undoubtedly are fleeing horrors. But a lot of them are economic migrants. And again, the idea that it's a bunch of 18 and 20-year-old healthy men who are the most at risk and need to escape their countries, as opposed to the elderly, the infirm, the women, the children. I mean, come on, give me a break. You look at the boats, you know who's coming across. If you're able to pay 3, 4, 5 grand to a people smuggler, and that's just the Channel journey, they've had to pay. You ain't the most desperate, because people who are really desperate don't have that sort of money. So even allowing for the village club together to get one across. Well, I'm sorry. That's it's just a nonsense. And they're in France. Yeah, well, that's the point I was going to make. They're not desperate at that point.
I know we don't want to be in France.
They can have a right. They can. I spent most of the last 2 years trying to get to sodding France.
I know.
So these people come. So, but this is the thing. I completely understand, even under international legislation, that they're allowed to do this. Well, that's fine, but how many people are we going to take? And the people who are opposed to this, so that the wringing hand, bleeding heart liberals who say this is a terrible, terrible policy, if you ask them what the alternatives, basically they think that we should open our borders to anyone who can get here.
Yes.
And they basically think that we shouldn't. They're the sort of citizens of nowhere people, aren't they? Global citizens.
When they say there need to be safe routes for people to come to apply, you ask them, what does that mean? And ultimately it boils down to, well, we don't believe in borders. That's
anyone who wants to come here should come here. That's what they mean.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I'm quite happy to know that, the criminal justice system in this country is working for some people. It doesn't work for most people, but it turns out if you are applying for asylum, you will get any number of opportunities.
If you're burgled, doesn't work for you.
Exactly, but somebody's getting the full use of our justice system.
But this is the thing. I do think this. I mean, the argument is that this is a terribly racist policy because this policy won't apply to Ukrainians, largely white, but it will apply to a lot of these people coming, channel migrants, as we've seen the footage, largely black or brown skin. So it's a racist policy. Isn't a lot of this actually racist? Which is that actually, the bleeding heart liberals and Islington lawyers who are upset by this. They're upset at the fact that these people are being sent to an African country. But most of them have come from Africa, for goodness sake. But look, if we said, these people are going to be sent to Sweden to live. If we said, we're going to resettle thousands, or let's face it, it's only going to be a few hundred, if ever, these China migrants in Switzerland, they'd be perfectly happy with it, wouldn't they?
It's one of the reasons why I find it so odd that the fact that the Rwandan government specifically is not a very nice one isn't brought up more frequently. Because of all the sort of the governments in Africa, there are some that you would be happy to do business with, and others like Rwanda, which is funding an insurgency in the Congo, which is very bad towards its own people in terms of political dissent. This is perhaps not the one, but that's never the argument that's gone down, because then you might have to get into the nitty-gritty of, conflicts around the world are quite difficult, politics is quite difficult, and only white people can be colonialists, not the Rwandans, even though they're doing it in their neighbouring country. But, that's kind of the point. It's not so much that this is a specifically bad regime, it's that this is in a part of the world that we don't think people should have to go to, even though it's a very beautiful country and it's a thriving young economy, it must be said. It wouldn't be the worst place in the world. If you wanted actually to get a job, there are plenty of jobs to be got in Rwanda. Not necessarily ones you want, but nonetheless, if you're that desperate, you'll find a roof over your head.
But this is the notion, is like how, when you're desperate, can you be, can you be choosy about where you get to go? And that is the reality.
Well, if you're choosy enough to want to leave France, then I suppose, yes, you can be very choosy about where you want to be. If it's that bad.
Yeah.
Just if your situation is so uniquely bad that France is absolutely intolerable as a concept, Italy, absolutely not, Spain, wouldn't do it. But the UK, that's the one. But of course, this is an awful country. This is the worst country on earth.
But this is well, that flight has absolutely got to go ahead. It's got to.
I agree, but it's under a lot of attack right now legally. There's about 4 challenges to it today. A judge ruled last week that it should go ahead, and that dealing with our migration problem was in the public interest, but that doesn't mean to say that all these do-gooder organisations and human rights lawyers have remotely given up yet. They're hoping to have it grounded by the end of today.
Well, let them go in their places. Let Charles put them up. Let the Archbishop of Canterbury put them up. What makes me sick, when all our dads and uncles went to war, what happened when they come back? They said, home's fit for heroes. What do they shove them in? Prefabs. Bloody bombed out houses. It makes my blood boil, the way we look after foreigners before our own people, and all they've done.
I mean, these people, these migrants, they're getting great treatment at the moment. They arrive on our beaches. We give them a pizza, and we give them a sun hat, and then we take them off to a nice hotel in a nice coach. Whereupon we give them money every week, and lots of them just disappear. They just say, thanks for. I'll just freshen up. I'll have a couple of nights sleep at this hotel, then I'll disappear into Britain, never to be seen again. So trying to end this constant invasion by these migrants, I think it's absolutely necessary. And the Rwanda scheme, it's not a very pretty scheme. I can see why people say this is extraordinary. However, it tries to tackle a serious issue, and if the message gets across to these migrants that if you get into one of those dangerous dinghies and you manage to get across without drowning, we'll fly you to Rwanda, they won't come in the first place. That's the idea.
Well, exactly. But why are we picking them up and helping them across? That is crazy. If they, you couldn't make this country up. It's absolutely outrageous.
Peggy, we're on the same page. Excellent call. Good to talk to you, Peggy.
Do you think that flight's going to take off with a single Rwandan refugee on it, and should it?
Well, I expect knowing this government, it'll take off with nobody on it at all, because what this is actually about is a gimmick to try and get the Prime Minister through a couple of by-elections. And that is a problem, just as with the food policy and everything else. It's incredibly short-term. It lurches from issue to issue. The only way of solving this in the long term is to actually re-establish a decent relationship with our neighbours.
Whose fault is that? Whose fault is it that we haven't got a decent relationship with the EU and France?
Well, I'd say this government is making a very poor fist of actually trying to build a decent relationship with our neighbours.
Really? You see, this is the thing a lot of people get angry about, and I'm very much included in this. President Macron has actually threatened to cut off electricity to Jersey, demanding, for instance, that even though we've had Brexit, that his fleet of fishing vessels have a right to fish in our seas, which they quite literally, factually don't. Is there anything that the French or the EU in particular could do that the Labour Party would ever criticise? Or are they always in the right and we're always in the wrong on this side?
I don't know whether you've ever been in a neighbour dispute, but once you get into these disputes, this is what happens.
No, tell me a single thing that this government has ever done to ratchet things up. Tell me a single... listen, I've criticised this government over a million things, very, very, very publicly. On this issue, they have done not a single thing. Tell me one single thing that Boris Johnson has done or said that has ratcheted up the tension.
I think breaking international law does not help.
When did he break international law?
Well, I think you'll be talking about it on the rest of this programme.
Northern Ireland Protocol. Northern Ireland Protocol includes Article 16, which allows the Northern Ireland Protocol to be unilaterally changed. That's not breaking the law.
Well, I think you'll find many people disagree with it.
You can disagree with it, but they've obviously not read the law.
That's the point about these kind of disputes. You either are locked in endless disputes with your neighbours, or you try and get on with them a bit better.
What should Boris Johnson be doing, or Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, whoever, be doing to sort of make nicey with the EU and the French to make this better, a situation with our channel migrants better? We've offered them money. We've offered to go and help do. We've offered to have our border force work there. I mean, what more does the Labour Party want the British government to do to stop this problem?
Quit. Because they're causing us endless problems. With
all due respect, Andy, that's a nonsense thing to say. Give me a practical thing that you think the government needs to do.
Most of the country wants to see the back of Boris Johnson and this lot, and we should not have a government like this that disrespects international law.
I hate to tell you that looking at the last general election, again, I've got my issues with Boris Johnson over the Partygate and the like. They were elected with an 80-strong majority back in 2019. Your party was soundly rejected. That is democracy, I'm afraid. I know your party struggles with democracy over things like Brexit and things. They were elected, and one of their key policies they were elected on was to deal with the issue of migration, and particularly illegal migration.
And they're not doing very well, are they? That's the point.
But that's because human rights lawyers keep trying to stop them from doing things that the British public wants them to do.
The question is, will it work? Our view is it's very unlikely to. In fact, it will probably make the situation worse. So come back in a couple of years, see what happens when we've got a Labour government. I think you'll find it will all be going much better.
I mean, would the Labour Party actually impose any sort of border controls at all, or are you a citizen of nowhere or a global citizen?
You obviously have no idea how our immigration system has worked in the past.
I do, thank you very much.
A strong immigration system, but we will do
a strong immigration system.
We will need it on the base. We will run a system on the basis of what our employers and businesses need. Go round the shops. Go round the shops and you'll see the empty shelves. Go to the airports, you'll see the queues. It's really going well, isn't it?
Rwanda, no Rwanda. No Rwanda, no Rwanda. Refugees are welcome here.
Refugees coming here to Britain represent the chickens of British imperialism coming home to roost. By a racist imperialist Tory party, but by a racist imperialist Labour Party that's racing them. Racing the Conservative Party.
Now, there's an American voice for you, who presumably is an immigrant, shouting on about a racist party running the country. What's it going to do with you, sunshine? Get lost. Get back to Peonia, or wherever it is you came from, mate. Don't be wrecking this country. And also, all of these do-gooders, right? going on and on and on about, we want refugees here, we love refugees. You don't even know who they are. The picture I've just put out looks like any general picture of people committed to football hooliganism, stripped to the waist, hands in the air, aggressive, nothing to do with their colour. They're of all different colours and hues. There's people there who are white, there's people there who are brown, there's people there who are black. There are people from African countries, from Asian countries, people from Afghanistan, there are people from Albania, people from other parts of, you know, the Eastern European quadrangle. People call me a racist for being against illegal immigration. It's got nothing to do with race. It's got everything to do with the law. People say, oh yeah, but most of them get the asylum they seek. Yeah, but that's because the legal business in this country spends so much time making sure that they keep them here. They advise them. There are charitable organisations like Migrant Organise that will tell them precisely how to keep staying here. Become a Christian, they say. That's what the guy who blew himself up in Liverpool did. Become somebody who says that they've rehabilitated from Islamic jihadism. That's exactly what happened to the bloke who blew up the Manchester Arena. Tell them that you're gay and you can't be sent home. That's a good one. That'll keep you here. And the reason that they get asylum is really because they stay here for long enough to qualify for residency. Because if you can stay in the country for long enough, then you can be given legal rights to stay. The whole system is broken. The whole system needs reform. There should be a flight taking off tomorrow with at least 100 illegal migrants on it. The flight may not take off at all. But I will not give up this fight until the flights do take off. And if Boris Johnson has to grow a spine of any kind in any part of his body and a pair, then let's go that way. Let's rid ourselves of the European Convention on Human Rights. Let's make sure that we do not cooperate with the European Union when it comes to taking our fair share. We've already taken our fair share. 30,000 illegal migrants are here from last year. None of them have left. There's likely to be another 60,000 here by the end of this year. And they won't leave either, unless the Rwanda project takes off. Do you know, and this is from the mouth of the ambassador to the UK from Rwanda, the UNHCR evacuated Libya, and guess where they took the migrants? The people that they had taken to rescue from the war. They took them to Rwanda. Afghans fleeing the Taliban were also taken to Rwanda. OK? The United Nations ruled that Rwanda was the fastest growing and fastest improving in its index for good governance and human development. That was last year. Why is the UN now against it? What is going on? Something needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now. Boris Johnson has had a good idea. Priti Patel has had a good idea. They're being stopped from carrying out the will of the people and government policy by a ragtag band of do-gooders, Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, foreign activists in this country causing problems. I'd deport them as well while we're at it.